Earlier this month, Netflix released a new documentary on the Lucy Letby case that was produced in collaboration with Cheshire Police. This was trumpeted as being a new and important documentary, but was in fact littered with poor arguments, misrepresentations, and errors. In this video, we're going to assess 15 of the biggest mistakes. It should be noted that some of these can be deliberate, some of them can be due to error, and some of them can frankly be due to stupidity. I will discuss my opinion on this as the video unfolds. Number 1. Pyjama-gate. During the cross-examination of Lucy Letby in the original court case, the prosecuting barrister, Nick Johnson, made considerable effort to suggest to the court that Lucy Letby was not arrested wearing nightwear and that she had lied to the court in indicating this. Not only was this already a specious argument because it was a detail of no importance in the account of Lucy Letby, but we now know that Lucy Letby was telling the truth. Not only was she arrested in her pyjamas, but one of the arrests was indeed more traumatic than was even described in court, involving officers barging into her bedroom at 6 a.m. in the morning while she was still in bed. I would suggest that this was a deliberate misrepresentation in court. It is certainly true that the police were fully aware that Lucy had been arrested in her nightwear, and numerous police officers were present in court, so they watched something unfold that they knew to be untrue. Number 2. We had to arrest Lucy. In the Netflix documentary, Simon Blackwell of Cheshire Police, who you can see on the screen now, suggested that when Lucy Letby was first arrested, the police had no choice other than to arrest her. This is completely untrue. It is very obviously untrue, even if you know nothing about police protocol and procedure. But I have interviewed Dr. Steve Watts on this channel, who is not only an extremely experienced investigator, but also wrote a significant amount of guidance on the policy and procedure for murder investigations. And he said the following: I would just say that we don't know yet whether lines of inquiry were ignored. So I think we need to make those judgments once we've had access to the documentation that can give us an indication whether that's correct or not. But I've already stated that he was wrong. He was wrong in law, he was wrong in terms of police procedure, he was even wrong in terms of the Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights, because that's where the criteria of necessity, justification and lawfulness comes from. It's about an action being taken by the state that is necessary, proportionate, justified and lawful. And to say that the only thing you can do is arrest somebody when you want to interview them about a serious offence is wrong. It's nonsense. I also put this question to Senior Coroner's Officer Stephanie Davies, who worked on the Operation Hummingbird investigation, and she said the following: I found it a ridiculous comment to make, and I thought, oh my God, there's going to be police officers across the country, possibly across the world, thinking what a stupid thing to say. It's not the only way or the best way. How ridiculous. It's an inappropriate use of force. And then they sold the rights to Netflix at a later date while they were congratulating themselves. I found that really stupid, and I think it does demonstrate the intellectually limited capabilities of the detectives that worked on this case. They've just adopted a narrative and they've just run with that narrative, and they've ignored all exculpatory evidence. They've ignored other lines of inquiry. They've ignored potential motives from those hospital consultants. She's been willing to speak with the police for ages, and she sent a very polite email to Paul Hughes. So you cannot say it was the only way or the best way was to arrest her. Finally, I will briefly mention that the police interviewed numerous other people in relation with this investigation, and none of them were ever arrested. All I can say with regard to this is that it's incredibly hard to believe that Cheshire Police genuinely thought this to be a legitimate argument. They must surely know that they had other options other than arresting Lucy Letby. Number 3. No comment. It was also strongly inferred during the Netflix documentary that Lucy Letby said no comment frequently during her interviews and avoided questions that were posed to her by Cheshire Police. The first thing to say about this is that the questions that were put to Lucy in the documentary, where she answered no comment, were questions that she had already answered previously. It was implied during the documentary that Lucy had no response when asked about the supposed confession note, but in fact, I've already been over her answers in relation to the confession note on this channel in previous videos. She was in fact asked this question more than once, even just in the interviews that we've seen, and she always answered all the questions thoroughly. So to suggest that she said no comment in relation to the confession note can only be described as deliberately misleading. The second thing is that we have multiple court transcripts available of police interviews. Unfortunately, the police don't make all of their interviews available, but they reenacted some of their interviews during the court process, and they have released a small amount of material into the public domain. So we do have a good amount of the police interviews available, and we know that throughout everything that is currently available, Lucy did not say no comment once, not on one occasion. Now, I want to be clear, I have these court transcripts in PDF format, and they run to 166 pages. I estimate that this would have taken somewhere between 6 and 8 hours in order to discuss. During those 6 to 8 hours, Lucy Letby answered every single question, never once saying no comment. Whereas if you were to watch this documentary, you would come away with the impression that Lucy was saying no comment all the time. As I mentioned previously, that is deliberately misleading. Number 4. Still pushing the confession note. In this documentary, Cheshire Police were still attempting to suggest that a green post-it note represented a confession from Lucy Letby. This has been so thoroughly discredited that it is quite extraordinary that Cheshire Police are still pushing this narrative literally years after it was completely decimated. However, I will briefly mention that there are many more statements on the notes which indicate trauma and innocence than the couple of cherry-picked comments that Cheshire Police have misunderstood and failed to analyse correctly. It can further be stated that a top confession expert, Professor Gisli Gudjonsson, has provided his support for Lucy Letby's defence, not only indicating that the confession notes are not a confession, but also quitting his job at the National Crime Agency in order to help Lucy Letby clear her name and be exonerated. Frankly, the confession note is not taken seriously by anyone with a grain of intelligence. Finally, as broken by Felicity Lawrence's article in The Guardian, Lucy's so-called confessions were written on the advice of counsellors. This was a counselling exercise that was recommended by Catherine de Bager, who was an operational health representative at the County Chester Hospital. Number 5. Didn't reference other notes. The Netflix documentary focused on the aforementioned green post-it note while ignoring an array of other notes which also indicate trauma and innocence. Perhaps the most interesting of these is a blue post-it note that I have never seen referenced anywhere else other than on this channel. In this note, Lucy Letby makes a comment, having noticed that the police have named her, that there is, quote, obviously no evidence, and she goes on to speak about no one else on the unit having done anything wrong. These are clearly the statements of an innocent person. This is a note that Lucy doesn't know anyone else will ever see that is addressed to herself. If she had done anything wrong, she would know that there obviously could be evidence of wrongdoing. Furthermore, she would also know that no one else had done anything wrong, and so she wouldn't even be referencing them in this note. This note contains exculpatory statements, and naturally, this was not included in the Netflix documentary. Just to briefly mention the second half of this post-it note, Lucy references an occupational health meeting, and it's clear that she is more concerned about reviewing her competencies and getting back on the unit to do her job than any police investigation, because she knows that she's an innocent person and she knows that she's done nothing wrong. Number 6. Handover sheets aren't evidence. We now move on to the frequently referenced handover sheets, which have become the bane of my existence as I have to make the same explanation regarding these sheets over and over and over again. However, the first thing to note is that handover sheets are not medical documents. They are a scrap of paper that is passed from one nurse to another to outline certain details. They are not medical documents. They don't really have confidential information on them. That is the first thing. The second thing is countless nurses and medical professionals have now informed me that it's not unusual to take home handover sheets inadvertently and that this should not be seen as somehow incriminating. Thirdly, the handover sheets are nothing to do with the indictment. They are completely unrelated to the allegations levelled at Lucy Letby. They are literally nothing to do with the case. Fourthly, Even those handover sheets that Lucy did have in her possession were nothing to do with the case. Only approximately 9% of those handover sheets recovered were related to babies from the case. It is very obvious that Lucy Letby had taken these handover sheets home inadvertently and that they were items of no significance to her. The only reason she hadn't thrown them in the bin, and indeed some documents were found in bin bags, is that she was slightly concerned that this would be irresponsible. She probably should have taken them back into work, but the possession of these documents is absolutely unrelated, categorically unrelated to any criminal allegation. It is meaningless. It is not evidence of anything. It should never have been in the court case in the first place. Number 7. Handover sheets weren't in chronological order. A claim was made during the Netflix documentary by Daniel Stonier of Cheshire Police that the police discovered handover sheets in Lucy Letby's residence in chronological order. This was already a strange claim to make because it didn't feature in the court case and has never been mentioned previously. It is also provably incorrect. The first thing to say about this is that multiple handover sheets were found in a Morrison's carrier bag and another bag for life that was stored under Lucy's bed, seemingly bundled up in the manner of rubbish. This was included in contemporaneous reporting of the time, but it was also explicitly discussed in court. Indeed, you can see a court transcript on the screen now in which it is noted that there were 31 nursing handover sheets found in bags in addition to the documents referenced previously. Furthermore, there were more documents found in a bin bag in Lucy's garage that were very obviously being treated as rubbish. Additionally, in the documentary, it was implied that the majority of handover sheets, or in fact all of them, were being kept in a box marked keep in some sort of neat and arranged order. That is categorically untrue as well. There were only 5 of 257 handover sheets found in that box, as the police are well aware. There are two things that can concluded for this. Firstly, the handover sheets were definitively not being kept in chronological order. That claim is completely untenable. Secondly, the police asserted again in this Netflix documentary, as has been asserted previously, that the notes were some sort of trophy or treasured possession for Lucy Letby. This is equally untenable considering what we know about the location of many of these handover sheets. And also, of course, most of them are completely unrelated to the infants in the court case. I can also briefly mention that there was actually one handover sheet that was treasured by Lucy Letby, kept in a box with a rose, and that was her first handover sheet from 2010 from her first shift on the neonatal unit. This was never mentioned in the Netflix documentary because it torpedoes the entire narrative related to these handover sheets, not least because this very obviously treasured handover sheet is the only one that ever was, and it's nothing to do with the court case. Again. Finally, let me emphasise that even if the handover sheets were kept in chronological order, which they absolutely were not, it doesn't mean anything. What does it even mean? It's not evidence of anything, it's completely meaningless information, even if it were true, and it's not true. Now, with regard to the status of this claim, it's very easy to describe this as deliberate misrepresentation. However, it's certainly not inconceivable that Daniel Stonier doesn't know what the word chronological means. So I won't assume that the documentary is deliberately misleading in this respect. It's possible, entirely possible, that Cheshire Police just don't understand the concept of chronology. Number 8. Shredder-gate. This was another claim made by police that stands up to no scrutiny whatsoever. Cheshire Police claimed that they caught Lucy out when she stated that she didn't have a shredder in her house. This was presented as being a lie, and evidence of a shredder being presented was displayed in the documentary. However, it appears that the shredder was in her mother's house, meaning that Lucy was not lying. Again, I should emphasise that this is a matter of such triviality as to be of no relevance to the case whatsoever, but it was pretty much the only supposedly dishonest thing that could possibly be put forward in relation to Lucy Letby, along with the equally embarrassing Pyjama-gate that we discussed earlier in this video. Furthermore, it's important to emphasise that Lucy could have used the shredder to shred all of the handover sheets, to shred all of the so-called confession notes, to shred all of the supposed evidence that Cheshire Police collected from her house. She didn't do that because she knew it was of no significance. It's just that the police were too stupid and too ignorant to recognise this themselves. Number 9. Lucy was evasive in interviews. There is not much else that can be said about this, other than it's simply not true. As I mentioned, I have approximately 7 hours of police transcripts, and Lucy answers every single question, is as helpful as possible, and the police had already conceded in public statements that she was unusually cooperative. So the idea that she was evasive is, again, just completely untenable. Once again, this certainly seems to be a deliberate misrepresentation. Number 10. Lucy paused when answering questions. This was another insightful observation from Danielle Stonier, in which she suggested that Lucy answered questions about general nursing immediately, but when posed specific questions regarding the infants on the unit, there were pauses in her answers. Now, there is a blindingly obvious explanation for this that anyone should be able to work out. When Lucy was asked a question about general nursing, this is her bread and butter in her profession. She knows these things inside out. She's required to be able to answer these things immediately. It would be a massive red flag for her in her employment if she couldn't answer these questions quickly, because she needs to respond immediately in life or death situations to the things that she's being asked about. The reason that she paused somewhat when being asked about the specific infants is that she was being asked to remember things that occurred several years previously. Indeed, Lucy did say several times during the interviews, and indeed in court, "I'm sorry, but it's not possible for me to recall that," which is simply an honest answer, as no one would be able to recall absolutely everything that happened on the unit several years ago. And we saw other people that were present at the time give similar answers, and indeed some of the eyewitness accounts and information given during the court proceedings has proven to be incorrect, precisely due to this fallibility of memory. Anyone with any critical thinking ability would be able to see this. Unfortunately, Danielle Stonier and seemingly Cheshire Police as a whole could not understand this. Number 11. Lucy was cold and emotionless. This doesn't require an enormous amount of consideration because the police had witnessed Lucy in tears and inconsolable, and there are numerous instances that we know of Lucy demonstrating emotion, not least the one that is on the screen now, where she sobbed in court, recalling the traumatic death of Child E at the hospital, and court proceedings had to be interrupted. I will say that in my book I have decimated this notion that Lucy was cold and unemotional is just simply untrue. What is traumatised behaviour has been completely misinterpreted, rather stupidly, I might add. Number 12. Deaths followed Lucy from night to day. So one of the allegations that's made about Lucy in this Netflix documentary, and that's indeed been commonly made in the aftermath of her conviction, is that deaths on the unit followed Lucy from night shifts to day shifts. This is a very commonly repeated claim, and it actually has no foundation. So I'm going to explode this for the first time today on this channel. The first thing to note is that Lucy was moved from night shifts to day shifts for a period of 3 months, beginning in April 2016. You can see this noted here in this document from the Thirlwell Inquiry, which is the official inquiry into events at the County Chester Hospital. So I want you to remember that date, April 2016. This is another document from the Thirlwell Inquiry that lists all of the 13 deaths that occurred on the neonatal unit at the County Chester Hospital. As you can see, the last 2 of these deaths occur on the 23rd of June and the 24th of June 2016. Prior to this, the previous death is in March 2016. So Lucy has been moved to day shifts by then. There are only 2 more deaths on the unit at that point from the 13 deaths overall that occurred over the period as a whole. Now, with regard to Child O, which is the first of these deaths on the 23rd of June, we know that there were medical errors on the unit. There were big problems, there were mistakes made with regard to ventilation, and also this blind abdominal insertion of a needle during resuscitation. So this is nothing to do with Lucy Letby. Essentially what's occurred is that there were supposedly deaths on the unit at the night. These were then associated with Lucy Letby. They moved her to day shifts. Doctors on the unit made mistakes. There was another death, and then they blamed her for that. The second infant here is Child P on the 24th of June, and this infant was suffering with a subcapsular hematoma. This infant, Child O, that we have on the screen now, was also suffering with this subcapsular hematoma. So even the 2 deaths that occurred when she moved to day shifts from the 11 previous deaths on the unit that preceded this, even these two deaths, there are very clear explanations for this that are nothing to do with Lucy Letby. That's the first part of this picture. So we actually know the times of the 13 infants that died on the neonatal unit at the Cancer Chester. You can see these listed on the screen now. Now, if we actually break this down, you'll see that 7 of these 13 infants didn't die at night. So 7 of the 13 infants died between 8:52 a.m. and 7:05 p.m. So they're all during the morning, during the afternoon, and during the early evening. So the majority of infants that died on this unit died during times when there was the maximum amount of staffing provided, and at a time that cannot possibly be described as being nighttime. So even the idea that there were a lot of deaths at nighttime, and then Lucy went on to day shift, and then suddenly there were loads of deaths during the daytime, none of those statements are true. The majority of deaths happened during the day anyway. Lucy was moved in April 2016, but then it's not as if there were loads of deaths during the daytime, because there were only 2 more deaths after that date. And as mentioned, the majority of deaths were during the morning, the afternoon, and the evening anyway. So there's 2 things that we can conclude from this. The first one is that only 2 of the 13 overall deaths occurred after Lucy was moved from night shift to day shift. So to claim that deaths followed her is specious and unfounded. And secondly, when the period as a whole is examined, most deaths on the unit occurred during daytime hours anyway. If you argue that some of these infants were non-indictment infants, it's important to emphasise that these were still cited by Dr. Breary and Dr. Jairam when they approached Cheshire Police. They were instrumental in the reason that this case was referred to the police. That's undeniable because we've got their document that they sent to Cheshire Police. You can see a section here in which everything relates to infants that were not included in the court case, but were sent to Cheshire Police as being suspicious. Number 13. We're sorry that the parents had to see this. Of all the absurd and embarrassing statements made by Cheshire Police, the notion that they're sorry that parents of infants who sadly died at the Cancer Chester Hospital had to see this new footage is particularly embarrassing. I won't go into the lengths that Cheshire Police went to tender this footage to Netflix, but it's very clearly only exists because Cheshire Police were willing to release it to Netflix, an entertainment company who were very obviously going to put it on their platform. If that hadn't happened, the parents wouldn't have seen it. So for Cheshire Police to claim that they're sorry about this is just utterly ludicrous. This is reminiscent of the previous police statement where, having submitted some further cases to the Crown Prosecution Service for consideration, all of which were rejected, they not only refused to accept this decision with any humility, they also made comments related to other people upsetting the parents, and that it's important that the privacy of the parents is respected. Of course, it was Cheshire Police who would upset the parents, no one else, and no one else could disturb the privacy of the parents because no one else knows their identity other than Cheshire Police. This whole debacle can only be described as embarrassing. Number 14. We welcome being challenged. Another particularly surreal claim from Cheshire Police during the Netflix documentary was that they welcome being challenged. I'm not going to go through all of the details which indicate that this is a statement of staggering hypocrisy, because that could be an entire video in itself. I will simply read out a tweet that I made a few days ago. In the recent article at Clark Micah, which is Peter Hitchens, on the Lucy Letby case, Peter Hitchens notes that Cheshire Police have even complained about the way in which their conduct of the case is discussed on X. This is confirmation that Cheshire Police are monitoring this platform, despite the fact that they ceased posting on X/Twitter on the 8th of December 2024. It was already obvious that they were doing this, as they accidentally liked a post that a friend of mine made a few months ago. Needless to say, the post wasn't complimentary. Prior to the 8th of December 2024, Cheshire Police posted over 48,200 times on X. On the 6th of December, they informed followers about Storm Dara. On the 7th of December, they helpfully pointed out that trees may have fallen and that residents of Cheshire should take care if they are out driving today. On the 8th of December, they updated residents on the fact that they were continuing to work closely with local authorities, Environment Agency and other partners due to Storm Dara. They then ceased posting on X and have never posted since. People in Cheshire are still waiting to find out what happened with Storm Darragh. Hopefully they will update us soon. I've pointed this out previously. I've suggested that the reason Cheshire Police have stopped posting is that they can't control comments on X and know that they would be inundated with criticism over their inept handling of the Lucy Letby case. We now know that Cheshire Police are monitoring this platform, but no longer consider it necessary to update their local community on everyday policing. We also know that they have complained about the way in which their conduct of the case is discussed on X. We further know that they have written to the Mail on Sunday complaining about negative coverage. It is common knowledge that Cheshire Police were very happy to participate in the recent lamentable and regrettable Netflix documentary. Conversely, Cheshire Police have been far from forthcoming when challenged. It has been noted that they previously responded to essentially all inquiries by claiming that they couldn't comment due to the ongoing investigation. They have now heroically updated this position to just refusing to comment. In his excellent article, Hitchens wrote that there has always been a contrast between the Cheshire Police attitude to outside questioning on the Letby prosecution and the organisation's readiness, for instance, to allow an officer to accept an award for his role in the case or to allow police staff to discuss the affair in sympathetic forums. And I've written, finally, it is impossible to disagree with this assessment of Hitchens. In addition to this tweet, I will simply mention that I know for a fact that several prominent people have attempted to correspond with Cheshire Police, and they have been absolutely resistant to this. Furthermore, I'm sent things through email every day, virtually every day anyway, from people who have tried to interact with Cheshire Police, who've tried to make complaints and so on, and they are all dead batted, blocked and given no credence whatsoever. The idea that Cheshire Police welcome challenge is beyond ridiculous. Number 15. No medical evidence. It is notable that the Netflix film only featured medical evidence from Dr. Shu Lee, who is critical of the medical evidence used in court. There was no evidence to provide any medical basis for supporting the conviction. At this point, there is such an enormous amount of criticism of the medical evidence, it would be almost impossible to do this. For example, Child C is a very obvious bowel obstruction. Child D died due to medical errors on the unit, particularly in relation to antibiotics, pneumonia, and infection. Child E died of a very obvious gastrointestinal hemorrhage, and the evidence provided in relation to Child G, that Lucy Letby deliberately overfed this infant with milk, has been treated with total derision by every medical professional that I've spoken with. Dr. Dewi Evans featured very briefly in this documentary and had nothing of any substance to say. I should explain that Dr. Dewi Evans was the lead expert witness for the prosecution in this court case. I would suggest that the police asked for his contributions to be removed, considering that they've asked him to shut up on several previous occasions. In summary, if we examine the 15 claims that I've assessed in this video, in reality, the inverse from what is asserted in the Netflix documentary is actually true. Number 1, Lucy Letby was arrested while wearing pyjamas. Number 2, Cheshire Police did not have to arrest Lucy. Number 3, Lucy did not answer no comment frequently. Number 4, the confession note is not a confession note. Number 5, Cheshire Police never referenced exculpatory notes. Number 6, handover sheets are not evidence. Number 7, handover sheets are not in chronological order. Number 8, claims made over the shredder are plainly wrong. Number 9, Lucy was not evasive during interviews. Number 10, incorrect inferences were made from Lucy pausing during interviews. Number 11, Lucy was not cold and emotionless. Number 12, deaths did not follow Lucy from night to day. Number 13, parents only saw upsetting footage because of Cheshire Police. Number 14, Cheshire Police do not welcome being challenged. And number 15, there was zero medical evidence presented pointing to guilt. This is not an exhaustive record of all the problems with the Netflix documentary. You can see my previous review of this Netflix documentary on my channel. I've also interviewed, as mentioned earlier in this video, Dr. Steve Watts and Stephanie Davies, where we discussed the Netflix documentary extensively. You can see these two videos on the screen now: Lucy Letby Netflix review and analysis, and Lucy Letby Netflix Stephanie Davies and Steve Watts interview. My forthcoming book on the case of Lucy Letby, Reasonable Doubt, examining the case of Lucy Letby, will be released in July. It's on the 9th of July. This book examines the background to the Countess of Chester Hospital, the medical and anecdotal information used in court, and the police investigation of Lucy Letby. I have pinned a link in the comments section related to this book. I hope that you have enjoyed this video and found it informative. If you did, then please consider subscribing to the channel, as I've already recorded over 200 hours of video on the debacle that is the conviction of neonatal nurse Lucy Letby. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to reading your comments.